sea urchins absorbing their own gonads and turning into zombies and running away from sunflower stars. I get into this and why kelp forest restoration is such a hot topic in California and along the West Coast with Kristy Kroeker, marine ecologist at UC Santa Cruz, on today's episode of Science Solutions Santa Cruz. I'm Jonathan Hicken. Enjoy. I'm in the studio with marine ecologist Kristy Kroeker. How you doing, friend?
Great. Good to be here. Thank you.
We actually get to work out together. I missed you this morning.
I know. Sorry.
Are you doing the open this weekend? Are you competing?
No.
So we go to SCG Fitness. Shout out Kara and Olivia and the homies at SCG. It's an awesome gym. But we're not here to talk about CrossFit. No, we're here to talk about marine heat waves and kelp forests and all that good stuff. So if I understand correctly, you kind of started your career looking at ocean acidification and these big, like, long-term effects and changes in the ocean.
Yep.
And then now these days, you're kind of more looking at these shocks to the system. Is that a fair way to characterize your work? Tell us a little bit about how this is all unfolded for you personally.
Yeah, totally. Okay, well, so my path to here has not been straight. It's winding, for sure.
Likewise.
And I actually did my undergrad here at UC Santa Cruz.
Cool.
I'm going back. I was way back there. When I did that, I got great experience learning how to be a marine ecologist. Like, I had really good training, but I'm kind of a bleeding heart, want to change the world kind of person.
Awesome. Love hanging out with bleeding hearts like you.
It took me a little while to come back to science. I was a teacher. I did a number of things. And I came back to science. I was like, I really want my science to make a difference and to matter. And at that time, we were just learning about the process of ocean acidification, which is the carbon dioxide that we emit through all of the industrial things that we do is absorbed by the ocean. It makes the water more acidic, changes the chemistry, and that is a huge threat to marine life. But we didn't know anything about it. So my tool in my toolkit is I'm a community ecologist.
Cool.
Which means I think about how all of the different animals and plants and algae in the ocean interact with each other, and then how that scales up to affect the whole community. So like a whole kelp forest or a whole seagrass ecosystem. So that was my toolkit. And so I studied how ocean acidification would affect communities. And at the time, I think it was really helpful in sounding alarm bells of whoa, this thing is coming. It's a big deal. It's going to change our ocean life pretty profoundly, but it's a long process, right? Ocean acidification is happening. We are seeing some impacts, but the changes that I was studying, they're probably 50 to 100 years down the road. And that's not the timescale on which we make a lot of decisions as a society. So in some ways, my focus has just shifted in recent years from what I call, this is kind of negative, but documenting the demise, which is what I felt like I did a lot in my early career, was just this is what is happening. This is what we think is going to happen. Watch out, sound the alarm bell, to thinking about what's the solution? What do we do about this in the meantime? Okay, so then at the same time that was happening, that my focus was kind of shifting. And I would say it still is. I'm still trying to figure out what is the solution to climate change? That's another question we can come back to.
Yes, we will. Promise you that.
During the period from when I started studying it, we would think about it, this long, gradual process. But in reality, that's not how climate change is playing out or is going to continue to play out. We see these really big extreme events. And that matters for ocean life, for all of the animals in the ocean. And so here in California, we started seeing these large marine heat waves, where all of a sudden the ocean warms up 2 to 4 degrees Celsius. That's what we expect for the end of the century. So it can happen now.
At a moment's notice. All of a sudden.
Yeah. In 2014 to 2016, all of a sudden our ocean was super warm. And that has all kinds of cascading consequences. And then it cooled down, and then it's going to heat up, and then it's going to cool down and heat up and cool down. And so then we started thinking again about these shocks to the system and how that's going to play out and essentially accelerate the process of climate change.
So much juicy science to unpack there. That's amazing. All right, let's start with just first to make sure everybody has a shared understanding of what is ocean acidification and sort of what is the What is the concern for that? I mean, we hear that in the news. We hear that all the time. But like, really, what is that, and what's the concern about it?
So, like I mentioned, ocean acidification is when the oceans absorb the carbon dioxide that we have put into the atmosphere.
Okay.
That's a good thing in terms of climate change, right? Because global warming is caused by carbon dioxide and other gases in our atmosphere. So the oceans are doing a huge favor to us because they're taking up a quarter of the carbon dioxide that we've already emitted. So they've slowed global warming.
Okay.
But when the carbon dioxide goes into the ocean and it's just diffusing at the surface and like making its way down through currents and things like that. But when it gets into the ocean, it reacts with the water and it forms carbonic acid. It's an acid. That's the namesake. Ocean acidification. It separates. It affects a bunch of other molecules in the ocean. Affects the chemistry, and one of the most problematic things is that it affects the availability of carbonate ions.
Okay. All right.
I know this is sciencey, but stick with me for a second.
Okay, I'm with you.
Carbonate ions. They are what animals build their shells and skeletons out of.
Okay.
That is what a coral reef is made of.
Okay.
Is calcium carbonate.
Calcium carbonate. Got it. Okay.
Okay. So the building blocks for abalone, mussels, corals.
It's all made from that.
It's all made from calcium carbonate.
Got it.
The joints of your Dungeness crab, calcium carbonate. So essentially, as the ocean is like changing its chemistry to deal with this new acid in there, it is buffering that by using the building blocks that animals use to make their shells and skeletons.
And the result then is that their shells and skeletons aren't as strong, or they're more fickle.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
They're not as strong. They're more likely to erode.
Okay.
So,
okay.
I mean, I don't know if we want to go down here, but so a lot of my really early research, I was studying these volcanic carbon dioxide vents off the coast of Italy.
Cool.
Not a bad place. But they're one of the few places in the world where volcanic activity is releasing carbon dioxide just like straight into the water column.
Yeah.
So it was in like 15 feet of water and it looked like a champagne glass where you just have these like bubbles of carbon dioxide coming up. Amazing.
Probably beautiful. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
Super beautiful. But that carbon dioxide, totally natural source, it changed the water chemistry just like we expected, or we expect with the global process of acidification.
Got it.
Right.
Okay.
So different
it was
drivers.
Like
This was natural. Yes, it was. We call it like a natural laboratory.
Cool. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Like a little microcosm of what we thought might happen.
Yeah. Our like crystal ball looking into the future.
Cool.
So what happened there? You saw very few animals that have that or algae that have that hard calcium carbonate, those hard shells. Like the snails were gone, the mussels were gone, the sea urchins were gone. The whole thing was less diverse. There was lots of fleshy algae, lots of fleshy seaweeds that kind of grew over everything. So if I could show you the pictures, it's pretty dramatic how much the ocean changed just by changing the chemistry.
So you also mentioned this 2014 to 2016 warming event. I think colloquially we know that as the Blob. Yeah. People in the community have probably heard of that.
Yeah.
So what was that? What happened in those couple of years there?
Yeah. So marine heat waves are just when we have anomalously warm conditions over I think it's like a 5-day period or something. And there's a set amount of time, the way that scientists define it. We have them all the time. We've always kind of had them. But they are becoming more frequent and more intense with global warming. And so that one stood out because it lasted for 2 years.
2 full years. Okay. And how long would we expect them to last, or had we observed until that point?
Oh, they happen they happen for 5 days, for 19 days.
Oh, wow. Okay. So this was like a huge outlier.
Oh, huge.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
We might have an El Nino year that's very warm. And so you could have like a whole season that's warm, but it was 2 years. It never really cooled during that time period. And so that's what made that one so crazy, is it just sat there for a really long time. And the scale of it too, like it was so big. It affected Alaska all the way through Baja. The entire North Pacific was impacted. So
wow.
It was huge.
Okay. And if I'm not mistaken, in late 2025, and maybe it's still going right now, but
It is.
okay, it's still there's a marine heat wave happening right now. How
Yes.
is this one different than the one that happened 10 years ago?
This one's big.
Okay. Even bigger?
No.
Okay.
But
okay.
as big, comparable.
Okay.
It's very big. Right now, I mean, we'll see how comparable it is. That's the thing. It's like we're monitoring it in real time. So it relaxed a little bit in the fall, kind of October. It cooled down a little bit, but then it set back up again and it's warm again. Right now, it's not quite as deep. So
the temperature fluctuation, there's
is
some
a little bit more on the surface, and so it's not quite as deep in the water column.
At the surface, that seems like a good thing?
Well, a lot of biology happens at the surface.
Yeah, sure, right, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but the more ocean that's warm, the worse it is.
So when we think about these marine heat waves, the one that happened 10 years ago, the one that's happening right now,
Yep.
What are you spending your time studying as it relates to these events?
Well, a lot of the work in our lab in recent years has been focused on what happened after that marine heat wave 10 years ago. So here in California, we had a massive collapse of kelp forest ecosystems.
Yes.
That was mostly in Northern California, but through Oregon, we definitely saw some collapses around here as well, but in a little bit more of a patchy way. And so the kelp forests in Northern California and Oregon have not recovered. And that's been 10 years.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And kelp, I mean, some of them are famous for growing really quickly, right?
Oh, yeah. They grow like, feet in a day.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're incredibly fast growers. And so they haven't recovered. And there's just a huge amount of interest in what do we do?
Yeah.
What do we do about it?
And why is there so much interest?
People love their kelp forests.
Yeah, they sure do.
They do.
They do.
Yeah, I mean, they support fisheries. They cycle carbon. They're important for all kinds of things. They're important for people culturally. They support. In Northern California, it resulted in a federal disaster designation for the red urchin fishery.
Wow.
It closed the last remaining abalone fishery in the state of California for red abalone. That was recreational, but those are really important fisheries. It's people's livelihoods. So it's had a big impact on the people too.
Tell us a little bit about maybe what you were expecting to find. What have you learned so far as it related to the impacts of that marine heat wave, and how does it apply to today?
Yeah. Well, so again, I mentioned I'm a community ecologist, so I always think about it through the lens of like all of the different species in a kelp forest and how they're responding to each other. But one of the things that we saw during the marine heat wave was that sea urchins that eat kelp just proliferated. So you go to Northern California now, it's just like carpets of these purple spiny sea urchins. They definitely played some role in eating all of the kelp, and they are probably playing a very important role in stopping the kelp from coming back.
Growing back.
Because these urchins are amazing. They're long-lived. We call them zombies. They can go months, years without eating. They essentially go into this zombie state where they absorb their gonads, and then they can survive.
Why does absorbing gonads help them survive? What is that all about?
You need food, right, to grow.
Yeah, and reproduce. Yeah.
So essentially, they just go into a pull everything back. We don't need to grow.
We don't need to grow. We don't need to reproduce.
They can shrink in size. They just you crack one open and they're just empty on the insides.
Wow.
But they can live that way for forever. They're probably eating a little bit. They're probably eating the little fuzzy stuff on the bottom.
Yeah.
And any little tiny baby kelp that lands.
Yeah, sure. If it's there, they're going to eat it.
Uh-huh. Anyone who would go look at this would be like, yeah, how no seaweed could make it here because it's just covered with purple sea urchins.
And is the warming water or the heat waves and the sort of the kelp proliferation, are those things related? Are those things connected?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
It's all connected. So one of the things we're working on is trying to understand what exactly tipped this, tipped the system, but probably the warmer water makes the urchins hungrier.
Hungrier?
Yeah.
Okay. Because maybe it speeds up their metabolism or something,
exactly,
right? Okay.
Exactly. They are cold-blooded. So as the water temperature warms, their metabolism warms, they move, they're hungrier, out they go. And then the kelp itself, it doesn't like the warm water. Warm water has fewer nutrients in it. So the kelp probably got a little weaker. It wasn't growing as well. So those two things together. And one more piece. So before the marine heat wave, we had this big event of sea star wasting disease.
Okay.
Probably people have heard about that.
Yeah.
Because for a while, almost all of the sea stars across the coast of California died. So anyone who liked to go to tide pools, like
they were gone.
They were gone.
Wow.
Like there were a couple species, little ones that survived, but like the ones that you see when you go to the tide pool, gone. But there was this big, beautiful one called the sunflower star.
Yeah.
With many rays. And it is a predator of urchins. It likes to eat urchins. And it got decimated by sea star wasting disease. And so it went functionally extinct across the state of California.
Oh my gosh, the entire state. Because
Mm-hmm.
I knew it was in Monterey Bay that it was a big deal, but
we're
everywhere.
talking
Up and down.
Yeah, everywhere.
Okay.
And it's like considered a endangered species in different parts of the its range. So probably the sea star died. That was probably associated with the warming, but it's very hard to know all of these things in the past.
Sure.
So there were no predators for those sea urchins. The water kept warming. They were hungrier. No one to eat them. The kelp got weaker. It's kind of a perfect storm.
Yeah, it's like a perfect storm or like a triple whammy of just the poor kelp had no chance.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. What questions are we asking now? What are we doing? What's some of the work to solve this problem?
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, the work to solve the problem in heat waves is big.
Okay.
And I just gave a seminar a couple of days ago, and I was like, that is a political problem. Like at this point, really.
Sure.
I mean, solving marine heat waves, that's a global climate change kind of thing.
Yeah.
And we need to be doing that work. I'm definitely not an either or. It's like climate change is a spectrum. We are moving along. It's a gradient. We're moving along it. We don't want to be like, no progress. Oh, well, I guess throw in the towel.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
We need to be doing everything we can to slow it. But at the local level or regional level, we're trying to figure out how can we bring kelp forests back and how can we do it in a way that is smart. So maybe they can withstand the next marine heat wave.
So you mentioned you identify as sort of a community ecologist first. So what does that actually look like when you're thinking about solutions? Where do you start when you think about how we're going to put this all together?
I think about this idea of leverage points.
Okay.
So we call them ecological leverage points, which is, can you find a place in the system where if you, just like any kind of leverage point, if you like attack that one, you can get the whole system back.
Mm-hmm.
So we are focused pretty heavily on the idea of sea urchin grazing or their feeding rates. What causes them to eat? And is there anything that we can do to slow their eating?
To slow their eating. Fascinating. Yes. Okay.
We've kind of been thinking about it on two different angles. One is just like, how does the environment, the ocean conditions, how do they affect how much a sea urchin wants to eat? And then we're thinking about the predators of sea urchins. And so particularly, we're thinking about those sunflower stars and what would happen if you brought a sunflower star back from functional extinction. And could you restore or recover those populations? And then what would it do? Could you bring kelp forests back?
All right, let's start with the first one.
Yeah.
So how do you make a species want to eat less?
You don't. They are like little munchy, crunchy, hungry zombies. But it happens naturally, we think, in the wild.
Yeah, I think about like the zombie state. You just said we already know about a state where they don't eat as much.
Well, but they're still hungry. If you put anything down, they will so if you go out go underwater, we spend a lot of our time underwater actually measuring these things, and you were to like lay out a plastic transect tape, something we use to kind of measure things, they will attack, or flagging tape, like the pink flagging tape.
Totally.
Sometimes we like mark things in the underwater with that so we can find it again. They'll eat it. Like they'll eat anything.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So actually that zombie state, they're still hungry.
Yeah.
They're just not eating.
Yeah. Just because
they're eating a little bit. They're eating a little bit. Okay.
Yeah. But they're just void inside. There's nothing in there. Well, so I mentioned they're cold-blooded.
Yeah.
So if warming increases how hungry they are. We wanted to know if cooling would decrease it, which it should, right? We should expect that. And one of the processes that's really important here in California for kelp forests is upwelling. Okay, so
Yeah, tell us what that is.
So upwelling it's caused by differences in the heating of land and water. Okay, the water has a higher heat capacity. This is like we're going back to middle school.
It can store more.
It can store more water. It does not heat up as fast.
Okay.
And you know this, right? Like it's 80 degrees outside and you're like, it's really hot. You go in the ocean, it's cold.
It's still cold.
So it requires a lot more energy to heat it up. So they have different heat capacities. The land warms up faster than the ocean. That causes wind. Okay, the wind typically moves down the coastline from Oregon down. You've also experienced this in Santa Cruz.
In fact, I feel like just this week. Yeah,
No,
like the winds are picking up.
It just hit.
Yeah.
And it happens with the warming, right?
Yeah.
As things start warming up. Okay, so that's coming down the coast. The earth spins. That pushes, those waters push the surface of the ocean offshore.
Got it. Okay.
So that's all just caused by the different heating, winds coming down, the earth is spinning. Cold waters from the deep part of the ocean fill in where those surface waters are being pushed off.
So it almost creates almost like a little vacuum effect or yeah.
It's like pulls it up. So that's called upwelling.
Okay.
Those upwelled waters are colder. They're coming from the deep ocean. They're more acidic. They have less oxygen in them. They also have more nutrients. So that's why we have kelp forests in the first place, because it just brings all of this like really nutrient-rich water into the near shore, right next to the beaches and headlands. But so we wanted to know, what does it do to urchin grazing?
Because now there's more cold water.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I have a student, Iris Flores. She's been doing this work, and she's shown that upwelling totally reduces how hungry they are, how much they graze.
How is Iris, or how is your lab? How are you actually studying that?
We do a bunch of experiments where it's like right next door.
Yep. Excellent.
Yeah. Where we essentially create a reservoir of the deep water, where we like use a massive chiller to cool it down. We pump carbon dioxide in it to make it more acidic. We pump nitrogen in it because that strips the oxygen out of it. So we like create deep waters. And then we have these like little tanks that we put our animals in, or our kelp in, and we distribute that upwelled water just the way that it would be distributed naturally.
To the best of your ability.
Best. Yeah. We've got little solenoid valves that like open and close and create little upwelling pulses and stuff.
Neat.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Neat. And so what the results are showing that indeed
it decreases their grazing rate.
You know, if you haven't visited the Seymour Marine Discovery Center at UC Santa Cruz in a while, or ever, you really should come visit us. We are right on the bluffs of the beautiful Monterey Bay, with an aquarium full of local species and a bunch of hands-on science exhibits that help you understand what's happening in our ocean and along our coast. We are connecting the incredible research happening at UC Santa Cruz with real-world solutions for our coastal community. We don't want science to just sit on a shelf. We want it to shape decisions, inspire kids, and help our community feel equipped to act. So if you care about the future of our ocean and our coastal community, or you just want to experience a place that makes you feel a little more connected to it, come visit us at the Seymour Marine Discovery Center. Science Solutions, Santa Cruz. Okay, interesting. So how do we apply that knowledge to conservation action?
Well, so upwelling's been happening along the coast. It has not helped the kelp forest recovery fully yet, but we were seeing evidence, I shouldn't say evidence. We have been seeing, there have been anecdotes. How about this? There have been anecdotes up in Northern California where you've got these areas where there's just hundreds and hundreds of urchins on the floor, and then people are seeing kelp just come back right in the middle of it.
Okay.
But then they go back and it's gone. And we think what's happening is like, that's an upwelling zone, and they're all pausing their grazing because it's so cold and it's acidic and low oxygen. They're like, oh, I'm just going to hang out here for a little bit. The kelp can benefit and grow. Then the upwelling stops, the winds die down, and they're like, oh yeah, let's go back to eating. So that's what we're seeing in all of our experiments. And so I don't think it's a matter of like kelp forests are going to come back in these like upwelling hotspots.
Sure.
But I think it's more about while we're doing this research, there are all of these nonprofits, local communities, state agencies doing restoration, where they're going out and killing urchins, culling urchins.
Culling urchins. Yeah,
yeah, pretty much.
We have a group in Monterey Bay who does that, right? Yeah.
Trying to remove that grazing pressure. That's a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
There are just so many of them.
Yeah.
It takes so many people hours diving underwater to do this. Up in the North Coast, they're trying to create a fishery for purple sea urchins where they collect them and ranch them on land and try to grow their gonads or their eggs for people to eat. So there's all kinds of interesting things happening. And what we want to do is just point those efforts. If people are going to do that, do it in these upwelling hotspots where the environment is going to work to your benefit.
Right. The counter would be, okay, they're going to go out and cull a bunch of urchins in a place that's normally always warm. And the urchin are just going to come right back and they're going to keep doing their thing.
Yeah, it's just harder. It's just going to be harder there.
So this is almost like a prioritization exercise of where do we put our time?
Where would you want to do it?
Yeah.
Now, I am not so naive to think that is the one driving factor for where we do restoration. It's also where people care about those kelp forests, where there are the people willing to put in the time to do that. So there's all of these different pieces that go into deciding where to do restoration. And this is one more piece of information that's like, we think this is where it's going to be more effective.
Okay, that's a really interesting question right there. These other human factors of, let's say you find a place that you would, based on that one study, you'd say, hey, this is the best place to do the culling.
Yeah.
But it's a 2-hour drive away from anybody and nobody fishes there and nobody goes there.
Yeah.
But it might be the most impactful place to do the restoration. How does the scientific community and the communities of people who rely on these things, how do you balance that choice?
Yeah, they're all important.
Yeah.
They're all important. I mean, scientists aren't doing the deciding.
Why not?
Because those are societal decisions.
Yeah.
And those are value-based. And so science is informing the decisions. I think that we have a super important role to play in saying, if you do it here, this is what you might expect. If you do it here, this is what you might expect. But where, it's just dependent on so many other things.
Okay. Well, I'll circle back to that. I want to get to the second lever that you brought up, which was the predation question and these sunflower stars. So relating kind of your work and your science to conservation action, you mentioned the predation and sunflower stars. So what work is happening on that front?
So there's a lot of interest in whether or not we can bring back sunflower stars. And the problem is there are very few sunflower stars out there. People are seeing, but it's a big deal when someone sees like a little
it's
dessert plate sized, and these things can get huge, like huge. And so when people see a little one, it's a big deal. We have a lot of questions just about like, is this a good idea? Could you do it? And so our lab also works up in Alaska quite a bit where the populations didn't collapse in the same way.
Okay.
They did. We saw some declines, but we can still find them up there. And so we're doing a lot of research trying to understand what happens in particular when you put a sunflower star back into an urchin barren.
What do they do?
Yeah.
And?
They scare them.
So the little urchins like a little scurry away?
They're terrified.
Oh, that's kind of...
Yeah.
It's actually probably kind of cute to watch.
Oh, it's cool. It's really cool to watch. And in Alaska, we started with some just like very, again, anecdotal, what happens if we do this? Where we just put one out there. And it's like a stampede.
Really?
Yeah, but slow motion. So like the sunflower stars move in pretty slow. But the some of the urchins, the red sea urchins, they'll do this thing, we call it a tumbleweed, where they just like let go. They're just like...
And they let the current just carry them away?
It was like, get me out of here. That thing terrifies me. Get me out. And then the little abalone, we have a lot of abalone in Alaska, and they all just like get up and run. They're so fast. So there's a lot of questions about like, are the sunflower stars just going to eat the urchins? Will they eat the urchins if they're empty?
The zombie ones, you mean?
The zombie ones,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because sea otters, we know in patchy habitats. So if they have a choice between a big fat urchin in a kelp forest and an empty urchin in an urchin barren, sea otters, they'll go for the kelp forest one. And so you can have these like patches of urchin barrens surrounded by kelp forests, even though you have tons of sea otters, because they're just like smart enough.
Yeah, they're just like, why spend my time getting that empty one? I know that one's going to be empty.
Yeah, totally. Yuck. I'm going over here.
Yeah, okay.
And doing that. And so that can happen. And so we just don't know very much about, will a sunflower star be like, ugh, this is not worth my time?
Or if they're opportunistic and they're just like, well, I'm already here, might as well.
Let's try this one.
Yeah.
Let's try this
Okay.
one. Let's try this one. And then do they actually eat fast enough for it to matter?
Yeah. Okay. And we just don't know yet?
No, there was a little bit of research maybe 30 years ago or something. But it was mostly in kelp forests and it was pretty small scale. And we just don't know a lot of what they're doing in urchin barrens. So that's the kind of work that we're doing. We essentially are putting out sunflower stars in the wild and urchin barrens, watching what they do, watching what the urchins do. We're running experiments to see, like, do urchins that have poor body conditions, so no gonads, from a barren, do they act differently than one from a kelp forest and so on when they get exposed to a sunflower star?
All right. And there is a sunflower star lab in Monterey, right? And so are they part of this project, or are they okay?
No, they're not part of this project. So when sunflower stars collapsed, when their populations collapsed, essentially they got the ones that were remaining in different aquariums or that people found, they got spread amongst different aquariums facilities, so that we weren't housing them all in one place when a wave of wasting disease comes through and wipes them all out, because it happens so fast.
So by isolating them, it was kind of like, okay, if we lose one, we're not going to lose all of them.
We're sending one to San Diego. We're sending some to Monterey. We're sending some up to Friday Harbor. So there's kind of like spread around to protect what we have left, even though we can still find some from up in Alaska and stuff like that. And so the lab in Monterey is breeding them. Essentially, and they're all trying to figure out, how do we breed them to like build populations
so that we can deploy them in these.
Maybe.
Okay. All right.
Maybe that's
we're not there yet.
Yeah, we're not there yet. And that's, I think the state of Oregon is going to let some researchers do some small releases and really study that closely. In California, we are very protective of our coastal waters. And so there's just a lot of rules about introducing anything. And as humans, we don't have a great track record.
Yeah, no, we've tried introducing things to places before that haven't gone well.
Yeah. So I think it's just a slower process. But I feel like the research that we're doing is just, it's like ground level. Should the state of California be considering this? Like, if you release sunflower stars in an urchin barren, can they do it? Can they bring it back?
So if you had the sort of the decision-making power, would you want to try that?
Oh, yeah.
Here? Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
Okay, so in Alaska, we have different urchins. We don't have the purple ones that are creating the barren here.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there's purple and red. Are there others?
Yeah, greens.
And then green.
Yeah, they're all over. There's so many, whites and all kinds.
Cool.
So we have purples and greens in Alaska. Oh, not purples. Well, there are a few of them every here and there, but mostly reds and greens. And so we can show, and we have been showing, that sunflower stars create what we call a landscape of fear. This is the scurry away effect. Yeah, okay, they're just like, the urchins are scared. They move away. And my student, Nikita Sridhar, did an experiment in a big mesocosm. So it's like a really big tank where she could release some stars and gave the urchins little places to hide and put little kelp in there to represent if kelp was trying to come back in an area. And she showed that, the sea urchins in those tanks with sunflower stars, they eat way less kelp. They spend way more of their time moving around, hiding, trying to get away.
All right. So bringing it to Santa Cruz, bring it to Monterey. I mean, we've got the science that's happening here. We've got the Sunflower Star Lab. Maybe they may or may not be involved. We've got the group that's doing the culling. We've got these communities of fishers and others who are starting to rely on the kelp. Like, what does kelp restoration look like for us in this community in the next, 5-10 years?
Yeah, it's a super good question. Well, it is one of the most rapidly growing fields I've seen. I think we got caught super flat-footed.
We being like
California.
Okay. Yeah.
Oregon.
California.
Yeah. Kelp forest ecologists.
Okay.
I think got caught pretty flat-footed. When I got here, I was working on ocean acidification, thinking about climate change, and I wanted to work on kelp forests, and I got a lot of blank stares of just like, well, they're so fast growing, and like
They'll be fine.
there's we haven't seen any signs of anything. We're in an upwelling zone where the water's real cold, and then bang,
Boom.
they're gone. And people are up at arms, and I would say in the scientific community, people are like, they're going to come back. No, they're not. We need to restore. It's just like, it's a little bit of the Wild West.
Okay. Interesting.
But tons of research happening. So I think if you ask me that in 5 years, I'll have a different answer. But people are doing cool stuff, thinking about the thermal. Essentially, should we be outplanting kelp that are more or less sensitive to temperature? But who are doing that research, doing the genetics, the genomics to actually understand, can we find populations of kelp that can survive better in warmer conditions? But then there's all of this like regulatory and ethical thoughts about, do we start moving things around? There's culling of urchins. And I think that's the like most straight ahead. You can cull urchins, but that is very small scale.
Yeah. You can't scale that. You can't scale that very easily.
That's what I like about the predator recovery is you can scale that.
But right now we're in a period of needing to understand better. Seems to me that there's this tension between, okay, we got to take our time and make sure we really understand what's going on versus we got to go get some conservation and restoration done.
Yeah. Yep.
But at least for the moment, we're in a period of just like
rapid research.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you get the sense that urgency is there?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, you go to a meeting of scientists around here, and it is the conversation about kelp restoration.
So let's bring this real home to families in Santa Cruz and the Monterey Bay.
Yeah.
So we lost, I think it was 90 or 95% of the kelp forests in the Monterey sort of corner of the bay, right?
Yeah.
Santa Cruz wasn't hit as hard, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, I think that's about right.
Okay. So why? I mean, worst case scenario here.
Yeah.
The kelp continues to decline or we lose it. What's the impact on this community or this region?
That's a great question. I think there are really important cultural pieces to kelp forests. That people just relate to it. They like seeing their kelp out there. Also, it supports huge amounts of tourism.
Mm-hmm.
The sea otters and the kayak trips and all of that. Our kelp forests support fisheries, so we see impacts to fisheries. So, it's multifaceted, but we don't want to lose them.
No.
And the kelp forests in Monterey are bouncing back.
So there's some good news here.
There hasn't, north of San Francisco, they haven't bounced back, but in Santa Cruz, they're starting to bounce back potentially. And we're lucky here that we have sea otters, which eat urchins. And so
they're doing their jobs.
We saw huge declines, but we're seeing some level of recovery that's not the same as we're seeing up north.
Yeah, there's this concept. I might bungle the term, but there's something like conservation relativism or something like that, where we if you look at a sort of a human's lifespan, my understanding is like when I go walk out there and I look at the coast and things like. We're not seeing, I'll use salmon as an example. There's not as much salmon running our rivers and kind of like cruising the bay as much as it used to be, but I never saw that. So I don't have that frame of reference. I do have the frame of reference of walking along West Cliff and seeing the kelp, beds at the top of the surface and seeing birds standing on them, seemingly just standing on top of the ocean and otters out there. And I think about, 40, 50 years from now, what if we don't see that? I mean, there's something culturally important about looking out there and seeing those little brown specks, right at the top of the ocean surface.
And I mean, we're like one of the premier places in the world for scuba diving. So it's not just the surface. Like so many of us have seen it under the surface, and it's like deeply important to us. So yeah, I don't think we should undersell that like cultural importance. Like people relate to kelp forests. Not everyone, but many of us in this area do.
So, in this program, Science Solutions Santa Cruz, when we talk about the solutions, I love to talk about this like community scale or regional scale solution. And a minute ago, we were talking about sort of these decisions being political and the role of scientists in decision making.
Yeah.
And so do you have an active role in sort of informing decision-making at our local or regional level?
Yeah, definitely. I
Yeah.
mean, we're in conversations with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife are the main folks that are really in charge of our kelp forest ecosystems, managing those. But also we have the National Marine Sanctuaries, and they're very involved. And there's very open communication happening between the scientists and the agencies that are working to protect them.
So what gives you personally, what gives you hope, or what gives you motivation to keep doing this, given that, it sounds like you've come across some pretty hard news in the last 10 years?
Yeah. I'm a positive person. I'm an optimist. And I remember I had this funny, I won't name the politician, but I was at this like big federal level event, and I gave a presentation at the Our World conference, so it's like Senator John Kerry and all these like world leaders, and I'm talking about ocean acidification. And I had this politician come up to me afterwards, and he's like, "How do you get up in the morning?" And I was like, "Whoa, how do you get up in the morning?" Like what you're doing seems even harder. But I think, one, I'm an optimist. And like I said before, I think that this is not an on-off switch. There are like different degrees of climate change, and we can still limit what's coming by taking action. So yeah, so I feel like I stay engaged that way. And then I'm nerdy enough that I can also kind of like dig down into just the science and find the science fascinating enough that can kind of buoy you when things are rough. But what gives me hope is my students, like truthfully.
Why?
Because they're so deeply committed, and so they're so good, and so they see the problems. They want to work on solutions, sometimes more than they can. I have to give them like, okay, remember that like this is a career. You're not going to solve it in one dissertation chapter. This is you work on it. But they're also deeply wanting to contribute to solutions that I feel like that's what I rely on when I'm feeling a little down.
And so for someone who might be listening to this and thinking like, oh, I really love the kelp forest too, and I want to help.
Yeah.
Is there anything that a local person can do to contribute to the effort in any way?
Yes.
I love it.
Yes.
Too often I get the answer no to that. So yeah.
At a larger scale.
Yeah.
Make sure you're voting.
Okay.
Make sure you're voting.
Yeah.
All of the actions that we talk about for global climate change, like they play into this. So do your part. And then if you actually want to get involved and you want to get in the water, like you can get in there and get involved in restoration projects. We have a bunch of community-led restoration projects happening around the coast. And so you can actually go out there and help. I mean, the other thing I will say is that the Nature Conservancy is like playing a big role here in California in the roadmap to recovery of the sunflower star. And they just have so much work going into kelp restoration. And so reach out to your local Nature Conservancy folks, see if you get involved. They're really leading a lot of the projects.
Is there anything else you that we weren't able to get to that you wanted everybody to know about marine heat waves or kelp forest ecology?
I teach a science communication class, and I always tell my students that you're going to get asked that question and you should have an answer to it. So yes, I was like, you absolutely should say yes and then say it again. I guess that kelp forests are vulnerable to climate change. We're seeing impacts. They've happened. They will continue to happen, but that there's really important role for science in thinking about how do we intervene in the system in ways that props them up, gives them more time, makes the restoration success more likely.
Well, thanks for coming in, Kristy.
That
was super fun. I hope to do it again sometime.
I know we don't get to talk about urchins at our fitness classes.
All right, that does it. Thank you so much, Kristy Kroeker.
Thank you.
All right, that does it for the pod. Thank you to Kristy for coming in and having that conversation with me. Thank you to Edith for editing. Thank you to Carrie for production. Thank you to Annie for distribution. Thank you to all of you for listening, and a special thank you and good luck to all my friends and all of Kristy's friends over at SCG Fitness. We're recording this episode at the beginning of March, and all of you are about to do your CrossFit Open, so good luck with that.